Have you ever heard of a death on the world's most dangerous mountain that nobody wants to talk about? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? In 2025, while the world's attention was focused on Everest, something happened on K2, the Savage Mountain, the killer peak, the first death of the year. And strangely, it vanished from mainstream headlines, almost as if someone wanted it erased. This is not just a climbing tragedy. This is a story about silence, fear, and the dark undercurrents that flow beneath the world's deadliest summit. Welcome to K2 Stories, where we uncover what others won't dare to say. K2, standing 8,611 meters tall, has always been a graveyard of dreams. Unlike Everest, it doesn't care for glory seekers. One small mistake on its icy ridges means certain death. Climbers often say, on K2, survival is already a victory. But in early July 2025, when the season was just beginning, an expedition reported something unusual. A climber, strong, well-prepared, with years of experience, never returned from Camp 4. His disappearance was sudden, his death declared quietly, and then, almost nothing. No official press release, no global headlines, no detailed reports. Just a shadow of a tragedy spoken in whispers among the climbing community. And that's where the mystery begins. Who was he? Why was his story buried under silence? And why, in a world hungry for sensational news, did the media turn away? We need to rewind to the night before it all happened. At Camp 3, a group of international climbers prepared for their summit push. The weather forecast showed a small window of calm, a rare gift on K2. Among them was a man known only as Daniel H., a climber from Europe aged 37. He had already summited Annapurna and Makalu. He wasn't famous like Nimsdai or Reinhold Messner, but in the mountaineering world, he was respected, strong, disciplined, and quietly determined. Witnesses recall how Daniel spent that evening. He brewed tea for the younger climbers, shared his extra oxygen mask with a partner whose gear had malfunctioned, and even cracked a joke about how thin the air was compared to his morning jogs back home. He seemed calm, ready, but on K2, readiness means nothing. The climb from Camp 3 to Camp 4 is one of the most brutal sections. Steep ice, loose rock, and the terrifying Black Pyramid rising like a wall. Every step feels like a gamble with death. Climbers move silently here, their crampons biting into ice as avalanches thunder in the distance. Daniel was seen leading a rope team that morning. His movements were precise, efficient. He was strong. But by the time the group reached Camp 4, over 7,600 meters above sea level, something had changed. One Sherpa later told fellow climbers, he looked different, his eyes, like he was seeing something we couldn't. That night, while most climbers rested in their tents, Daniel stepped outside. Witnesses recall hearing his boots crunch in the snow, his silhouette standing against the jagged horizon. No one knows what was going through his mind in that moment. But hours later, when the team prepared for their summit attempt, Daniel was gone. At first, they thought he had gone ahead, but his rope line was untouched. His gear, carefully arranged, was still in the tent. Only Daniel was missing. A search began, but in the death zone, searches are short, brutal, and rarely successful. Minutes feel like hours. Oxygen runs low, and the mountain punishes hesitation. Then just before dawn, a climber shouted. They had found him. Daniel lay motionless, not far from the fixed lines. No signs of a fall, no visible trauma, just stillness. His face frozen, his eyes wide open as if staring at something that terrified him. The official explanation was altitude sickness. But climbers who saw him swear it didn't look like that. It was too sudden, one whispered later. People collapse, they fade. But Daniel? He looked shocked, like something caught him by surprise. And then came the strangest part. Normally, deaths on K2, tragic as they are, make headlines. They remind the world of how dangerous the mountain is. They inspire articles, documentaries, social media storms. But Daniel's story never spread. His name appeared briefly on one obscure forum, then vanished. When fellow climbers tried to post tributes, some of their messages were quietly deleted. When asked, the expedition company gave only one sentence. A climber passed away at high altitude due to natural causes. That was it. No details, no interviews, no photos, nothing. Almost as if the mountain had swallowed not just his life, but his memory. But why? Why hide the first death of 2025 on K2? Some whisper it was about politics, that the expedition was funded by powerful sponsors who didn't want bad press. Others say it was because Daniel was part of a sensitive project, something unrelated to climbing, and his death was more than just a tragedy. It was an inconvenience. And then there are the darker theories, that he saw something up there, something no one was supposed to see, and that's why his story was silenced. One thing is certain, the truth is buried somewhere on K2, under layers of snow, ice, and secrecy. The morning after Daniel's body was found, the mood at Camp 4 was heavy, silent, almost unreal. Climbers who had spent years training for this single window on K2 now sat inside their tents, whispering, debating. Should they still go for the summit? Or should they turn back? On most expeditions, a death is announced, mourned, and reluctantly accepted. But this one felt different. Something in the way Daniel had been found, his eyes open, his face frozen in fear, haunted the others. One climber, a woman from Argentina, later confessed, "It was like he saw something in the dark. Not a fall, not exhaustion. His expression was unnatural. And then suddenly we were told not to talk about it. That command, do not talk, didn't come from the mountain. It came from men with radios." At around 9 a.m., a helicopter circled the lower slopes of K2. It couldn't fly high enough to reach Camp 4, but its presence was strange. Climbers whispered that the expedition leaders had been ordered to keep details hidden until officials arrived. One Sherpa, who later spoke off the record, said they told us pack his gear, no photos, no videos. Nothing leaves the mountain. That alone was enough to spark suspicion, because on K2, photos and videos are currency. They prove summits, tell stories, honor the fallen. To forbid them? That meant someone wanted control. By evening, word of Daniel's death had trickled down to base camp. A few climbers sent messages to their families, but within hours, posts about the incident started disappearing from social media. Even in private groups, moderators deleted mentions. Who was giving these orders? And why? The mystery deepened when Daniel's body was never recovered. Normally, fallen climbers above 7,000 meters remain where they die. Retrieval is almost impossible. But here, no one could even confirm where his remains lay. The team claimed the mountain's shifting snow covered him overnight. Others insisted they saw ropes dragging something downhill. Either way, Daniel was gone. For days, the climbing community buzzed with questions. In Pakistan, where K2 stands, local journalists tried to report the death, but their articles were taken down within hours. One editor even admitted, "We were told to stay silent." Higher orders, but higher from where? This is where the story takes a darker turn. Some background about Daniel began to surface. He wasn't just a mountaineer. Back in Europe, he had worked for a research group linked to defense contracts. His specialty, satellite imaging and remote sensing. In simple terms, he studied landscapes from above, interpreting hidden details. Why would a man like that be on K2? His friends said he wanted adventure, that mountains were his escape. But others weren't so sure. Some claimed Daniel carried unusual equipment in his pack, not just climbing gear. A compact drone, a set of encrypted drives, a camera lens far more advanced than typical expedition tools. Could it be that Daniel was not only climbing, but observing, recording something? And if so, what did he see? On the night before his death, several climbers recall him standing outside his tent, staring toward the horizon. But it wasn't the summit he looked at. It was further west, toward a remote glacier rarely visited. One Sherpa said he muttered something like, "That can't be real." Nobody pressed him. At altitude, people often hallucinate. But what if Daniel wasn't hallucinating? What if he saw something the rest ignored? Now let's step back. K2 lies in a region filled with secrets, border tensions, restricted zones, military surveillance. Not far from the mountain are facilities few outsiders know about. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, satellite images have shown strange patterns in the snow, structures that appear, then vanish. Daniel, the expert in remote sensing, may have noticed something unusual, something he wasn't supposed to notice, and that's when the theories explode. Some say Daniel's death was convenient, too convenient, a silent removal disguised as altitude sickness. No autopsy, no body, no questions. Others whisper about what he left behind. A memory card, smuggled down the mountain by a fellow climber, supposedly containing his last photos. Those who claim to have seen it say the images weren't of K2's summit, but of lights. Strange geometric lights beneath the glacier. Were they military, natural, or something else entirely? We can't confirm. Nobody can. Because the card, if it ever existed, disappeared. Just like Daniel. And then, something even stranger happened. A week after Daniel's supposed death, a message appeared on a private climbers forum under his username. Just 2 words, "Still here." It was quickly deleted. The account locked, but screenshots spread quietly like wildfire in shadows. What did it mean? A cruel joke? A hack? Or was Daniel somehow alive? No one knows. But from that moment, the line between death and disappearance blurred. For the climbers who remained at Camp 4, the incident left scars. Some turned back, abandoning their summit dreams. Others pushed upward as if to escape the fear clinging to the tents below. But every step they took carried the weight of Daniel's ghost. And one thing was certain: whether he died of altitude or something darker, Daniel's story was not meant to be told, which is exactly why we will tell it here, because silence only breeds more shadows. Base camp, usually a place of camaraderie and noisy radio chatter, turned into something different after Daniel's disappearance. Instead of stories around the mess tent, climbers huddled in corners, speaking in half-sentences. Sherpas avoided cameras. Expedition leaders suddenly grew cautious with their words. It was as if an invisible curtain had fallen over the mountain. And then came the whispers. "There's going to be a meeting tonight." That evening, under the thin glow of lanterns, a group gathered inside a large tent. Expedition leaders, liaison officers, a few influential climbers. The rest were told to stay away. One Pakistani cook, who later spoke anonymously, described the scene. "They closed the flaps. I heard raised voices, arguments, but no one explained to us. What could they be arguing about?" Some say it was about logistics, whether to continue summit pushes despite the death. But others believe the meeting was about something far more delicate: controlling the story. By dawn, a decision had been made. An official note was drafted for press release. A climber passed away at high altitude due to natural causes. No name, no details, just a sterile line. When journalists at Skardu Airport asked questions, officials repeated the same words, as if reading from a script, and when someone dared to ask about Daniel's background, the answer was chilling. "We have no record of that climber." No record? For a man who had registered with the expedition, signed permits, and slept in those very tents. The denial was surreal. It was like erasing him from existence. Meanwhile, rumors spread like fire among the climbers. Some swore they saw men, strangers not part of any team, arriving at base camp after the meeting. Dressed in plain clothes but carrying military radios. They asked questions, they collected gear, and then they vanished. One American climber whispered, "They weren't here for the mountain. They were here for Daniel." Back home in Europe, Daniel's family received little more than a vague phone call. "We regret to inform you that your son passed away due to altitude complications." When they asked for details, where, how could they recover his belongings? The line went silent. Days later, a sealed package arrived at their door. Inside, Daniel's passport, his watch, and a notebook with half the pages torn out. No explanation. For his sister, this was the breaking point. She began contacting media outlets, demanding answers. But again, her emails bounced back with polite refusals. "We cannot verify this story." It was as though the world had been instructed, "Don't touch Daniel's case." And yet, in the shadows, fragments of truth kept surfacing. One climber at base camp claimed he had seen Daniel's drone being packed away by someone who wasn't part of their team. Another whispered about encrypted drives being taken out under escort. But the strangest rumor was about Daniel's notebook. The missing pages. A Sherpa who helped carry Daniel's bag swore the torn pages weren't blank. They contained hand-drawn sketches, strange shapes and coordinates. He didn't understand them, but he remembered one word scrawled repeatedly across the margins. Underneath. Underneath what? The glacier? The mountain itself? The more you listen, the more the mystery deepens. Was Daniel a victim of the mountain or a victim of silence? Some climbers began to fear they might be next, not because of avalanches or storms, but because they had seen too much, heard too much. One Norwegian admitted, "I wanted to speak, but then I realized accidents happen easily here. A loose rope, a cut line. I stayed quiet. Fear became the real oxygen of base camp." Everyone breathed it, and then came another twist. 2 weeks after the official death, a climber descending from Camp 2 found something half buried in the snow, a glove. Inside, a tiny memory card. He pocketed it. Back at base camp, he slid it into a laptop. The files were damaged, corrupted by cold. But 3 images remained. The first, a shot of the camp, ordinary. The second, a blurred picture of stars, probably accidental. The third was different. It showed a stretch of ice field, but with glowing shapes beneath. Not reflections, not camp lights. Geometric patterns, sharp and symmetrical, glowing under the glacier like circuitry. The climber froze. He copied the files, then quickly deleted them from the card, fearing someone might trace it. But word got out, quietly, and soon the whispers spread. Daniel had found something buried beneath K2. Of course, skeptics argue it was a glitch, a camera error. But those who saw the photo swear it was real. Too precise, too unnatural, and that's when the cover-up theory solidified. Daniel hadn't just died. He had discovered something powerful enough for men in suits to fly to the world's deadliest mountain and erase him from memory. But there's one more piece. The climber who found the memory card? Weeks later, on his flight home, he received an anonymous message on his phone. Just one line: delete what you copied or you won't land. He deleted everything. But before he did, he saved one blurry screenshot. That image, half corrupted, half visible, still circulates in secret forums today. It shows nothing clear, nothing definite, but enough to haunt those who look at it, enough to make them ask, what is hiding under the savage mountain? This is where our story pauses. Because what began as a tragedy is no longer just about a climber. It's about secrecy, silence, and something buried deep in the ice. And as much as people want this story forgotten, we're only just beginning. The story of Daniel's death should have ended on the slopes of K2, but it didn't. Instead, it began spreading like cracks in ice, reaching far beyond the mountain, into government offices, into boardrooms of corporate sponsors, into places where ordinary climbers had no access. Because Daniel wasn't just another climber. Not anymore. He had become inconvenient. In Islamabad, the first unusual sign appeared. A document leak quietly posted online, then deleted within hours. It listed special research permits issued for the 2025 climbing season. Among them was a line item connected to Daniel's expedition. But the permit wasn't for climbing. It was for surveying. And the issuing authority? Not the Ministry of Tourism, but the Ministry of Defense. What was the Defense Ministry doing, authorizing a mountaineering expedition? Soon after, whispers grew louder. A journalist in Europe reported receiving an envelope with no return address. Inside were photocopies of what looked like sponsorship contracts. Companies you wouldn't expect on a mountain. Technology firms, satellite imaging corporations, had quietly invested in Daniel's trip. Why? One clause, circled in red ink, stood out. All data collected remains property of the consortium and must not be independently distributed. Was Daniel, knowingly or unknowingly, part of something larger? A mission disguised as an adventure? Back at K2 Base Camp, survivors of the 2025 season began noticing oddities. Helicopters arriving at night, landing without lights. Equipment being carried out under tarps. A section of glacier cordoned off by men with rifles, claiming it was unstable ice. But one Sherpa later said, "I have worked here for 20 years. Ice is always unstable, but this time it was not about the ice. It was about hiding something." And then came the chilling revelation. A climber from South America claimed that Daniel had confided in him days before his disappearance. Daniel showed him a fragment of what he had discovered, a printout from his drone images. The printout revealed symmetrical lines beneath the glacier, forming what looked like a massive hexagon, stretching kilometers across. Daniel had said only one sentence. This mountain is not just rock. Was it a natural formation? Or something else entirely? Theories exploded. Some claimed it was evidence of a lost civilization, older than recorded history. Others whispered about Cold War experiments hidden under the ice. But the most controversial idea was that Daniel had stumbled upon something not of this earth. Ridiculous? Maybe. But then why the secrecy? Why erase him instead of honoring him? Meanwhile, Daniel's sister, still fighting for answers, finally caught the attention of an independent documentary filmmaker. Together they began piecing together fragments, the missing notebook pages, the sealed package, the photograph of glowing patterns under the ice. But their progress came at a cost. The filmmaker reported being followed. His phone tapped, drones hovering over his home at night. One evening his car was forced off the road. He survived, barely. The police called it an accident, but he told Daniel's sister in private, "They don't want us asking questions." And yet, questions kept multiplying. Why had Daniel's gear been confiscated? Why were expedition leaders silent? Why did governments issue vague denials instead of clear reports? And most disturbingly, why did multiple climbers from that season vanish from public life soon after? Men and women who had shared tents with Daniel, suddenly unreachable, their social media wiped clean. It was as if they had been erased too. The whispers spread beyond the climbing community. Conspiracy forums lit up with speculation. Was K2 hiding a buried structure? Did Daniel capture proof of it? And did powerful forces step in to bury the truth? Skeptics dismissed it as paranoia, but others pointed to a pattern. Every attempt to bring the story mainstream ended in silence. Articles pulled, interviews canceled, videos demonetized. It was no longer just about Daniel. It was about control, and then something unexpected happened. Months after his death, a small file surfaced on an encrypted forum, posted under an anonymous account. It claimed to be Daniel's final message, scheduled for release if he didn't return. The message was short, typed in plain text. If you are reading this, I am gone. I was right. The mountain is not what it seems. I have left proof where they will least expect it, inside the mountain shadow. No one knew what the mountain shadow meant. A riddle? A coordinate? A metaphor. But it reignited the hunt. Some climbers swore they would return in 2026, determined to uncover what Daniel had found. Others warned them to stay away, because if Daniel had been silenced, what chance would anyone else have? And yet the legend only grew. Daniel's death was no longer just an accident. It was the first death of the 2025 season, but also the first in a new kind of war, a war for truth. But here's the question no one dares to ask out loud. What if Daniel's message wasn't meant for us? What if it was meant for them, the very people trying to silence him? What if the mountain shadow wasn't a clue for the world, but a warning for those who buried him? The savage mountain has claimed many lives, but in 2025 it claimed something more, a secret. And secrets, like glaciers, don't stay buried forever. The story of Daniel should have faded by now. Mountains swallow names after all. How many climbers vanished on K2, their stories forgotten under ice and stone? But Daniel's name, it refuses to be buried. Months after his death, a climber in Nepal received a strange package. No sender. Inside, a small hard drive sealed in waterproof casing. The note attached read only, "From the mountain's shadow." When plugged in, most files were corrupted. But one folder opened. Inside were recordings, Daniel's voice, speaking into a microphone during his final days. Shaky, exhausted, but clear. Day 12. The drone captured something again. Patterns under the glacier. It's not ice, it's structured. Geometric, almost like architecture. Pause. Heavy breathing. Day 14. I showed one of the Sherpas. He told me to stop. Said the mountain punishes curiosity. But I can't unsee it. Another pause. Wind howling. Day 16. If something happens to me, know this. I was right. And they know I was right. That's why they're here. Watching us. Watching me. The last recording cut short, ending with a strange sound. Metallic. Echoing. Nothing natural. That sound haunted those who heard it. But the real twist came not from Daniel's voice, but from the images stored alongside. One file survived intact, a 3D scan from his drone. It revealed something breathtaking and terrifying. Beneath the glacier, kilometers below, lay the outline of a massive structure. Not random cracks, not illusions of ice. A symmetrical complex, hexagonal chambers connected by straight corridors, far too precise to be natural. It was buried deep, invisible to the naked eye. But Daniel had mapped enough to prove its existence. The conclusion was unavoidable. Something, whether human, ancient or beyond, was hidden inside K2, if true. It changes everything we know about the savage mountain. K2 is not just the deadliest peak. It is a tomb, a vault, a container of something the world is not ready to face, and maybe that explains the silence. Because think about it. What would happen if the world knew? Governments would swarm the mountain, corporations would dig, tear, destroy, and climbers, the dreamers, would vanish, replaced by soldiers and machines. The savage mountain would no longer be a mountain. It would be a battlefield, maybe. That's why Daniel had to disappear. But here is the cruel irony. By erasing him, by covering his death, they only made his story louder. His name is spread farther than most climbers ever dream. His voice, meant for no one but his diary, now echoes in secret corners of the internet. Daniel wanted truth. And in some way, he got it. So what do we do now? Do we dismiss him as another tragic climber, lost to altitude? Or do we carry his story forward, refusing to let it vanish like so many others on K2? Because the mountain holds more than snow and stone. It holds silence. And silence is the most dangerous thing of all. Maybe the real secret is not what lies under K2, but what fear does to us. Fear of speaking, fear of asking, fear of believing. Daniel broke that fear, and he paid the price. Here's the twist no one expects. The story isn't about Daniel anymore. It's about us. Every time we share his name, every time we question the official line, every time we remember the first death of 2025 that media tried to erase, we chip away at the silence. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Daniel wanted most. So I'll leave you with this. What is buried under the savage mountain? We may never know, but one thing is certain. Truth does not stay buried forever. And here, on K2 Stories, we will keep telling it, piece by piece, voice by voice, until the silence breaks. Because the mountain may belong to nature, but the story belongs to us.